and politics and business, but much broader, including civil society. And therefore, no, not therefore, this is an issue which fascinated me since I entered politics more than 30 years ago. What is the relationship between those people inside and outside? And I came to the following conclusions. I need about 4 minutes. 7 points. The first is, don't be afraid that it's 7, but it's, first is the people who are drafting laws, deciding on laws, and afterwards implementing laws are always living in an ivory tower. They are not necessarily linked to the reality outside. And you see it when the TV debates, the presidential candidate is asked, how much is a metro ticket? What is the price of butter? They don't know. Therefore, second point, Therefore, second point is that you need stakeholders to have an access to these people in the ivory tower. And this is not exclusively industry. It's not exclusively civil society, but a mix of all three. If you have such a relationship, you need rules to determine how this relationship should be. And 4, it has to be normal. If this is a minister, you are a minister, hypothesis, that you meet at 9 o'clock a student representative, at 9:30 Microsoft, at 10 o'clock an industry association, and at 11 o'clock a representative of the Orthodox Church. That means that you are not only focusing on one, but that you behave like a good scientist. A good scientist takes the different opinions, put them in front of you, and then evaluate what is the right thing. Not swallow this or this or this opinion, but to take a decision by comparing them. 5th point, all of this has to be transparent. Therefore, the European Union has done an important step by having a transparency register. And 6, you in Ukraine are in a wonderful situation. You know why? No, not because of you, possibly as well, but why? Because you have so many different models. The US model, the British model, the German model, the EU model, the French, whatever. And you even see how these models are working. And therefore you can take out of these models elements for your own way to deal with public affairs. And 7th, that's the most difficult, you need a change of mindset, of culture in your country. For politicians, not to obey and follow the guy who gives you the most money, but to behave like, what I said earlier, the scientist. For the stakeholders to understand that they have to put on the table clear what they want and not link it with money. And for the general public, it's very, very difficult to explain that this is not corruption, it's not public relations. It is a part of democracy. It's a part of democracy that outside people who only represent ideas or values can come as well. To end some short elements on especially Brussels. It brings nothing if you want to address policy makers if you don't know them before. That means it is necessary to have a relationship before, and when the subject is on the agenda, then you can come, as we know each other already, please, and you can come with your position. Next, you can always see who's a German or Scandinavian, because very often they come with documents. Say, here, this is, no. You have to be so credible, so convincing, and so authentic that your word is enough. And afterwards, you think and then you can send a link to the documents which you should not give in the meeting. Next special Brussels thing is hierarchies are incredibly flat. An example, Hillary Clinton came here when she was Foreign Affairs Minister to lobby on the passenger data directive, that you have to give information to the US before the passengers land if they are possibly Muslim or if they have not paid their ticket their own, things like this. And she insisted to speak to the President of the European Parliament on this. It was nonsense. The President said, thank you. And that was it. She should have spoken to the rapporteurs or even the shadow rapporteurs. But the embassy thought, oh, come on, it's impossible. Our Hillary Clinton should speak to an MEP from the Netherlands and 3 other MEPs from whatever country. No, this is impossible. No, hierarchies are flat. And therefore, some industry associations behave incredibly intelligent. They don't invite necessarily the MEPs for a drink or a dinner. They invite the assistants of the MEPs. Because stupid people think MEPs are reading their emails. It's not them, it's the assistants. That means hierarchy means here in the Commission not to deal necessarily with the general director, the commissioner or the director, but to deal as well with the desk officer who is drafting the original text. And when you do really something important for society, you should do coalition building. Coalition building means you set up everything around and you ask other people to join the boat. An example, when I was in charge of the Greenpeace European Union office, we started the debate on GMOs, genetically modified organisms. And finally this became a success. Why? Because we construct the boat, the content, and then we ask, among others, the churches to join, because of moral reasons. That means sometimes it is important to set up the whole structure and then ask others to join. And the very last, to counterbalance or to enlarge what you've said, when I was working with Greenpeace, I worked with about 10% were lawyers. The others, there was an archaeologist, a priest, arts historian, a lady who did feminist studies, a chemist. That means what is fascinating, and this I propose to you as well, when you are coming here and meeting interesting people, try to discover what they studied, and you will be astonished. Okay, economies, law, but there are so many interesting study subjects of those people who are working in Brussels, and therefore I'm totally happy that Destiny brought me here to Brussels, because, like you, it is much more fascinating a lobbying than Washington, where I was for a certain time very close to the World Watch Institute, the largest environmental research institute, and I saw their lobby work, but here it is much more interesting, and therefore I propose to you from Ukraine, try to learn from some elements here in Brussels and install these in the public affairs law and push, that you have it in your country as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So if I rephrase in some words, I think what you say was we need authentic leaders and we need to network constantly to make sure that when we have an issue, we know to whom we have to go and not just find out the day before, pretend to be prepared with some piles of paper.
In one sentence, in English you say different eggs in different baskets. You should have, the worst thing, if you would have 3 social democrats from Germany or 2 Greens from France or 2 liberals from Italy. No, you have to cover the whole of Europe, politically and geographically.
That's a big challenge, but indeed I think that's also what makes it very rich. Katrina, do you, because this is what Frank is saying, you should ask for help. Do you get help from European power institutions, from the European Parliament? did you get any help to start? And can we talk on do you have examples of European Ukraine advocacy projects that are going on, or other projects?
It's about money or about consultancy? Because
No, to train lobbyists.
I see. Okay, because you know, many people in Euronest program, in Eastern Partnership, they wanna mostly work with, for example, budget aspects and with the European Commission to take money to these countries. It's philosophical question. It's good way or bad way for country to, for example, borrow money from International Monetary Fund, to take some money from European Commission, and so on and so forth. But I have one good example of cooperation between, for example, Ukraine and European Commission. We have BRDO project. It's Office of Efficiency Regulation. And they work on green policy book and white policy books in every sector of policy making, and they advise for Cabinet of Ministers, its government of Ukraine, to build their policy on this deep analysis. And of course, in mostly post-Soviet Union countries, they haven't money and motivation to do such deeply work for government, and people who have salary, for example, 300 euros in government, they haven't motivation to do, and sometimes haven't experience to do such type of work. That's why I think that some projects like BRDO, who founded by European Commission, can be good for Ukraine, Moldova, Bulgaria, Georgia, and other countries. But it's also important to understand that if you're weak, like Georgia, like Ukraine now, let's speak honestly, you can take model, and it will be not your model, but it will be model which created by pragmatic people who vote and who promote their interest, but not your interest. And I think that lobbying industry, it's important industry to also clarify what is your interest. Your interest in Moldova, in Georgia, in Ukraine, and I think in future also in Russia when they come over, you know, oligarchic kleptocratic system to some more liberal model. That's why some cases it's good of cooperation, and some cases I think that we must have more clarifying, more stronger position about, for example, our inner market and so on and so forth. But it's long discussion.
Okay. I think, I don't know if... Yes, sure, of course.
Katerina, I'm a little bit disappointed with you.
It's discussion.
You are the president of the Ukrainian Association of GR Professionals and Lobbyists.
For this year.
Yes, sure.
I joined the conference, as you know. That's a lobbyist.
But this means you have a special attention on you. You have a special duty and task, and you could raise your voice towards the European Union, towards other stakeholders in Ukrainian affairs, and saying, we don't want only training courses for experts in fiscality, in tax, in trade. We want as well training courses for people in public affairs and lobbying. Because here in Brussels are institutions who give it. I'm teaching there regularly as well. If there would be the demand from the Ukrainian side, especially from you, President, I think this would have an impact to have in the near future lobby courses as well, where you can study different ways of lobbying and then decide what you would like to cover. Therefore, my secret recommendation to you, ask this to the Western partners.
Yeah, I think that it's extremely important because, for example, only last year, our biggest industries, for example, private defense industry, they created a community and association only last year. People who, so it's multi-million industry in Ukraine. And also big industry like people who work with energy infrastructure. They also developed their association only this year. So that's why, yeah, we extremely need tools to work in small industries and also in multi-millions industries in Ukraine. We need this culture.
I was wondering, of course we don't have really somebody that is specialized on the panel in the African continent, because there also we have some countries that have still problems where things are not going very democratic, but on the other hand, they're quite good. Did you have any experience with the African continent? Do you have the feeling that they came here and said, please help us and teach us how to lobby?
Yes. I've worked intensively with countries of Eastern Africa. And when I look on those inscriptions in lobby institutes here, or the diplomacy academy here, you have always a certain number of Africans. But nevertheless, the notion of public affairs is much, much less developed. And if you want to work on African affairs here, you have to choose the big fairs, political fairs like ACP, Africa Pacific meetings here, where you have on a silver plate all the important leaders from the countries who are coming here to Brussels. And if someone is interested in working on Asia, next week will be incredible. Normally, incredible week is when you have 28 prime ministers and presidents here. Nightmare for security, hotel reservations like this. Next week, you will have 51 presidents and prime ministers. The EU, 28, plus Asia, Russia, Kazakhstan, China, India, Indonesia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Myanmar, Burma, Singapore, Australia and New Zealand, and from Europe as well, Norway and Switzerland. That means next week, don't invite anyone for a hotel, everything is taken. Don't ask the police, they are totally occupied with other things. But if you are working on one of these countries, this is the ideal place. I got heaps of invitations already from embassies, from think tanks and associations who organize events, because this is linked to side events. There's a youth summit, Europe-Asia Youth Summit. There is a summit on economy, another summit on business. Therefore, next week when you meet here someone who looks a bit Asian, that might be the Prime Minister of Malaysia or the Foreign Affairs Minister of Vietnam.
But what you say in a way is, if they don't ask you to be at the table, take your folding chair and go to the table and make sure you're there.
Yes,
this is what you said to Patrick.
exactly. But here, the press club. I'm very often at the press club. I see some faces I've never seen here. This press club is incredible. It's not a normal press club. It's much more communicative, because the real secret is, okay, you have to remember 1,200 members. But if you're coming without being a member, everyone smiles to and says, yes, welcome, who are you? And that means you're not kicked out. That means go to the website of the press club, and then come to the meetings which are interesting. And this is the trade minister, imagine, from the Philippines. And it's very difficult in Manila to have a meeting with him. But here in the press club, just after his intervention, or just before his intervention, and when he's there standing alone with 3 assistants, you go and say, "Hoi, I'm from Microsoft." Yeah? And he will be happy. That means here it is incredibly easy compared to a national level And the last thing, when you meet here a key person, most key persons are very sad here. Why? Because
of the rain?
No. Because when you're a top person in your country, you walk like this, with entourage, 99% have a clue who you are. But you are from what country?
Ukraine, I was born.
Okay, Ukraine. You know everyone in Ukraine who is important, but you don't know who is the social minister in Belarus or the environment minister in Moldova necessarily, because we have a national perception. It's the same here. When here Landsbergis, the former president of Lithuania, who made end of Soviet Union together with Gorbachev, was here, 90% have not recognized him. And that means when you and I was here with the vice president of Congo, I organized this visit, I said, look, this is Landsbergis. It's impossible. This old man with plastic bag, no entourage. But if you greet them, this key person who is totally happy in the capital that everyone knows him or her, they are incredibly flabbergasted and happy. That means you can speak here incredibly easy to people, but one element is that they don't think you are a police officer. Who are you? You have to say, "Ooh, I'm Frank from the Greens," and you show your badge or whatever. And then the people are open. And therefore, Yulia Tymoshenko, I met her once in the elevator in the parliament, I said, "But I know you from the photos." "Yes, I'm Yulia Tymoshenko." I said, "Great!" That means this is possible here in a national capital, much more difficult.
Okay.
Therefore, you have to be, a word on this, you have to be proactive here in Brussels.
John, what are the general challenges in the sphere of GR? Is it reputational challenges, like in the Manafort case, or other cases we heard in the British system? What's your vision on the biggest challenge you have?
Lobbying at the international stage has to be completely transparent. You know, we talked about the New York Times test or the Financial Times test. Every email you write, every telephone call you have, every meeting that you do, you have to be proud to have that published in a newspaper. And the idea that you're going to somehow be clever and get around things, just, it's crazy. And, you know, if you're going to be a government affairs professional, you know, trust is hard to earn and it's very easy to lose. And when you lose it, it's gone. So, you know, it is a matter of protecting yourself, but, you know, this is a profession where if you don't feel like you want to practice high ethics, you probably should